Imagine a millionaire's party, filled with rich guests laughing and drinking, where a humble waitress is invited just to serve. He plans to embarrass her with a piano challenge, expecting her to fail. But when she sits down to play, something incredible happens. Her music stops everyone cold, silencing the room and turning the night upside down. This is the true story of Emily, a girl with nothing but talent and courage who transformed her life from serving tables to becoming a celebrated pianist, proving that real power comes from within, not wealth or status. Mr. Gregory Langston was one of those men people either admired or secretly disliked. Rich, powerful, and always dressed in expensive suits, he owned several businesses across the city. His face often appeared in newspapers and magazines, not because he was kind or generous, but because he knew how to make money and show it off. He loved attention, and more than that, he loved being the most important person in the room. Gregory had a habit of throwing large, extravagant parties at his mansion on the hill. His house was huge, with long marble floors, glass walls, and a swimming pool that glowed blue at night. Famous people, politicians, business partners, and other rich folks often came to these parties, not always because they liked Gregory, but because they didn't want to be left out. Everyone wanted to stay on his good side. One day, Gregory decided to throw another party to celebrate a new business deal. He had just taken over a smaller company, and like always, he wanted the world to know about his success. He called his assistant and said, "Let's make this one special. I want everyone talking about it. Big names, big lights, big night." He also added something else. "Hire a few waiters and waitresses from those low-end agencies this time," he said with a smirk. "I like seeing the contrast. Makes me feel even more successful." His assistant hesitated, unsure if she should say something, but she quietly nodded and left the room. Gregory wasn't really interested in helping people who worked hard for a living. In fact, he liked having people around him who were clearly less powerful, less rich, and less important. It made him feel bigger, stronger, and more in control. That's why, instead of hiring professionals from luxury event companies, he picked a small catering service that usually sent people to serve at birthday parties and school events. That's how Emily Carter ended up on the list. Emily was 23 years old. She lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city with her younger brother and sick mother. Just a few years ago, she had been studying music at a respected arts college. She played the piano beautifully, and her teachers had said she had a real gift. Her dream was to become a concert pianist, to perform in halls where people sat silently and let music fill the room like magic. But dreams, as beautiful as they are, sometimes crash into reality. Emily's mother had fallen seriously ill during her second year in college. Hospital bills, medicines, and daily care became more important than piano recitals. Emily didn't think twice. She dropped out of college, picked up part-time jobs, and focused on keeping her family afloat. She worked in grocery stores, helped clean houses, and eventually signed up for a small catering agency that paid a bit more than minimum wage. When the agency called her and asked if she could serve drinks and snacks at a party, she said yes. She didn't ask who the host was. She just wanted to earn enough money to pay the electricity bill and buy medicine for her mom. She ironed her only clean white shirt, tied her hair back, and caught the early bus to the address written on the paper. When she arrived at Gregory Langston's mansion, she paused for a moment at the gate. The house looked more like a palace. Giant windows, perfectly cut bushes, fountains that danced in the sunlight. She felt small standing there, holding a folded apron in one hand and a small bag in the other. But she took a deep breath, reminded herself that she was there to work, and walked through the gates. Inside, the staff were busy preparing the place. Lights were being adjusted, tables were being decorated, and expensive dishes were being arranged neatly. Emily was assigned to carry trays and serve drinks during the evening. The manager of the catering team gave her a quick tour of the house, including the grand piano room, where a few guests might be seated later for soft music and conversations. That piano caught Emily's eyes immediately. It wasn't just any piano, it was a grand Steinway, black and polished to perfection. It reminded her of her college days, the echo of notes, the feel of ivory keys under her fingers. But she quickly looked away. That part of her life, for now, had to stay locked away. Gregory arrived just an hour before the guests. He walked in, wearing a dark blue suit, sunglasses still on even though it was evening, and a gold watch that sparkled every time he moved his hand. He glanced around, nodded at the decorations, and then noticed the waitstaff standing in a line. His eyes stopped on Emily. She was standing quietly, her hands folded in front of her, eyes lowered. Something about her calm and humble posture caught his attention. He walked up to the catering manager and asked, "Who's that one?" The manager replied, "That's Emily. She's new, came from the smaller agency." Gregory smiled, but not kindly. "She'll do," he said. "She'll be a fun one." The manager didn't understand what he meant, but Gregory had already walked away. During the evening, as guests started arriving, fancy cars pulling up, heels clicking on marble, and glasses clinking, Emily did her job. She moved silently between groups, offering drinks, nodding politely, and avoiding eye contact. Gregory, meanwhile, was in full form. He laughed loudly, greeted his guests with exaggerated hugs, and kept making little comments that were meant to sound clever but often came off as rude. At one point, he walked up to a group of men near the bar and pointed toward Emily. "See that girl with the ponytail?" he said loudly enough for her to hear. "I'm thinking we should have her entertain us later. Maybe play the piano. I bet she knows a tune or two from the streets." The men laughed, but a few looked unsure. Emily heard the comment. She kept her face still, her body moving as if nothing happened. But inside, a small flame of hurt was beginning to burn. She didn't know what was worse, the insult itself or the way people laughed without thinking. Gregory wasn't finished. A little while later, he passed by Emily and whispered, "I hope you're ready to perform later. We could all use some amusement." Emily didn't reply. She simply nodded and walked away, but her mind was racing. What did he mean? Was he serious? Was this part of her job now? Or was he just mocking her? She wasn't sure, but she knew one thing. She didn't want to be embarrassed. Not again. Not in front of so many people. She remembered the piano again. The beautiful grand piano in the next room. The idea of touching those keys again filled her with fear and longing at the same time. Could she? Should she? What if she played badly? What if they laughed again? But beneath all her doubts, something else was waking up inside her. Something that had been sleeping for too long. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was the quiet strength of someone who had given up everything for others, who had faced real hardship, and who had learned how to survive with dignity. Emily didn't want revenge. She didn't want to prove anything. But if she was going to be made fun of, it would not be without a response. As the night grew louder and brighter, with more laughter and clinking glasses, Emily continued to serve. She stayed silent, but she was no longer just a waitress. She was something more now, something that even she didn't fully understand yet. All she knew was that something was about to change, and this time she would not look away from the piano. The evening moved forward like a beautiful show. Fancy lights sparkled on the glass walls of the mansion. The sound of laughter echoed through the rooms, and soft background music floated in the air. Expensive perfumes, loud voices, and fake smiles mixed together as rich guests admired the artwork, talked about business, and sipped wine from crystal glasses. Emily walked slowly between the guests, carrying trays filled with small snacks and colorful drinks. She wore the same polite smile on her face, but inside, she felt like a storm was growing. Gregory Langston's comments still echoed in her ears. He hadn't stopped. Every now and then, he pointed toward her and made another joke in front of his friends. Sometimes he called her Miss Mozart or Little Beethoven, and once he said loud enough for people to hear, "Maybe she'll give us a concert after dessert." Every time Gregory made fun of her, some of the guests laughed. Not all of them, though. A few looked away awkwardly, unsure how to react. One of them was his daughter, Rachel. Rachel Langston was around 25, just a couple of years older than Emily. She had long dark hair, a calm face, and a quiet personality. She didn't talk much during her father's parties. She often stood alone near the windows or sat with a small group of guests who talked about books, travel, or art. Unlike her father, she never enjoyed making others feel small. In fact, she often felt uncomfortable when he did. That evening, Rachel noticed her father's jokes. At first, she stayed silent, hoping he would stop on his own. But when she saw Emily lower her head again and again, pretending not to hear, something inside her felt wrong. She didn't know who the girl was, but she could see that she wasn't just another server. There was something different about her, something calm, graceful, and strong. Meanwhile, Emily tried to focus on her job. She told herself not to react, not to show her feelings, not to let them see her pain. She needed the money. She needed to finish her shift. But the more she tried to stay invisible, the more Gregory dragged her into the center of attention. At one point, Gregory gathered a small group of his closest friends near the grand piano. The room was filled with soft yellow light, and several guests had gathered around to enjoy drinks and light conversation. Gregory stood in the middle, telling one of his usual stories about a trip to Europe, when he suddenly turned and pointed at Emily. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly, raising his glass, "tonight we are lucky to be joined by a multi-talented member of the staff." Some guests turned their heads. "This young lady here is not only skilled at carrying trays, but also, I'm told, an artist of the piano." People chuckled. Emily froze where she stood, holding a tray of champagne glasses. Gregory continued, "I think it's only fair we let her share her art with us. A small performance, just to keep the evening alive. What do you say?" Before Emily could say anything, some guests clapped politely. Others looked confused, not sure if it was a joke or something real. Emily's heart began to beat faster. She wasn't sure what to do. Her fingers tightened around the tray. Should she say no? Would that make it worse? Was he serious or just mocking her again? She looked around and caught Rachel's eyes. Rachel gave her a small nod as if to say, "You don't have to do this." But something strange was happening inside Emily. The piano was right there, the same piano that had caught her eyes earlier. She hadn't touched one in over a year, and now, even in the middle of this uncomfortable moment, a part of her longed to sit at it, just for a minute. Gregory smiled, thinking he had pushed her into a corner. He was waiting for her to say no, to be embarrassed, to walk away. That would be funny to him. That would give him and his friends another reason to laugh. But Emily didn't move away. She took a slow breath, gently set the tray down on a nearby table, and walked toward the piano. The room fell quiet. The guests turned to look. Some were still smiling, expecting something silly or awkward. Others watched with curiosity. Emily sat on the bench slowly, her hands resting gently on her lap. She looked at the keys, black and white, lined up like soldiers, waiting. Her heart was beating fast, but she wasn't scared. Not anymore. She lifted her hands and placed them on the keys. At first she didn't press anything. She just closed her eyes for a moment. In that silence, she thought of her mother at home, lying in bed. She thought of her little brother, drawing pictures while waiting for dinner. She thought of the music she had once dreamed of sharing with the world. Then she began to play. It wasn't a song people recognized. It wasn't a famous tune or a well-known melody. It was something she had written herself, years ago, during a time when she still believed the world had a place for her. The music was soft at first, gentle like a whisper, but full of emotion. It rose and fell like a wave, touched with sadness, filled with hope. The guests who were ready to laugh suddenly became still. The notes floated in the room like magic. No, one spoke. Even the servers stopped to listen. The song told a story of a girl who had lost everything, of love and struggle, of quiet strength. Emily didn't look up once. Her fingers moved like they had been waiting for this moment all their life. Her body swayed gently with the rhythm. Her heart poured into every note. Gregory stood nearby, unsure what to say. His smirk had disappeared. He looked uncomfortable, almost nervous. He hadn't expected this. He had expected a joke, a mistake, something to laugh at. Instead, he had uncovered something real, something raw and beautiful. Rachel had tears in her eyes. So did a few older guests. No one had imagined the quiet waitress could create something so powerful. The grand room, filled with expensive furniture and glass chandeliers, now belonged to the girl at the piano. When the final note faded into silence, Emily slowly removed her hands from the keys. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She just sat there, breathing softly, letting the moment pass through her. Then came the sound of clapping. It started slowly from one corner of the room. Then it grew louder. People stood up. Some clapped with their hands high. Others simply nodded in quiet respect. It wasn't the kind of wild applause given to pop singers or stage performers. It was the kind of clapping that came from hearts that had been touched. Emily stood up and looked around. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her music had already said everything. She picked up her tray again and returned to her work. But everything was different now. The guests no longer saw her as just a waitress. They saw her as someone with a story, with talent, with strength. People looked at her with new eyes, some with admiration, some with guilt. Gregory didn't speak for a while. He stood quietly in the back, realizing that the joke he had planned had turned into something unforgettable. But not in the way he wanted. That evening, something changed. Not just in the mansion, but inside Emily, too. She had walked into the party as someone invisible, someone expected to stay silent, to blend into the background. But now, even without trying, she had become the center of the room. Not because of her clothes or her name or her money, but because of what lived inside her. A part of her that she thought had died long ago had come back to life. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if anything would change tomorrow. But for now, she had played her music, not for applause or fame, but for herself. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly alive. The party was still going on, but something in the air had changed. Emily's performance on the piano had left the room quiet for a long moment. Even though people clapped and smiled deep inside, many of them were thinking about what they had just witnessed. Some guests returned to their drinks and conversations, trying to act normal, but their eyes kept going back to the girl in the white shirt who had just reminded them what true beauty felt like. Emily, however, didn't try to stand in the spotlight. She quietly returned to her job. She picked up her tray and began offering drinks again. Her hands were steady, her steps calm, but her heart was still heavy with emotion. She had opened up a part of herself that had been locked away for so long. For those few minutes, it felt like she had traveled back to her old self. The girl who loved music, who had dreams, who once believed the world would hear her one day. But she didn't let it go to her head. She knew where she was. She knew this was not a music hall. This was a party in a millionaire's mansion. These people didn't know her, and most of them didn't care about her story. She had done what she felt was right in the moment. That was enough for her. Gregory Langston, standing near the bar with a drink in hand, had lost his usual confident expression. He had tried to turn Emily into a joke, but instead, she had become the star of the evening. He could feel the shift in the room. Guests who usually hung on to his every word were now whispering to each other about the waitress. Some people were even giving him strange looks, as if they were silently judging him for trying to mock her in the first place. Gregory didn't like it. He hated losing control of the room. It made him feel weak, and he never liked that feeling. His daughter Rachel, on the other hand, was still standing quietly near the piano. She had been deeply touched by Emily's performance. It reminded her of why she loved music in the first place. Rachel had learned piano as a child, but for her it was just a hobby. She had never felt the kind of emotion Emily had poured into those keys. She wanted to know more about the girl who had just turned her father's party into something unforgettable. As Emily passed by with a tray, Rachel gently stopped her. "That was beautiful," Rachel said softly. Emily looked at her and nodded. "Thank you. Where did you learn to play like that?" "I used to study music before things changed," Emily replied. Rachel didn't push further. She could tell that Emily wasn't the kind of person who liked to talk about herself, but she felt the need to say more. "You don't belong here carrying trays," Rachel said gently. "You belong on stage." Emily gave a small smile but didn't answer. She wasn't sure if it was kindness or pity, and she didn't want to get her hopes up. She had learned long ago that people said nice things in the moment, but life rarely changed because of compliments. Rachel watched as Emily walked away. She felt a deep respect for her, not just for her talent, but for her quiet strength. She didn't know much about Emily's life, but she could tell it hadn't been easy. Meanwhile, Gregory was trying to bring back control. He walked up to a group of his business friends and started talking about a new investment he was planning. But even as he spoke, he could see that they were only half listening. Their minds were elsewhere. Finally, one of them, a man named Charles who owned a chain of music schools, said, "Gregory, that girl, where did you find her?" Gregory pretended to laugh. "Oh, just one of the servers. Surprising, right?" "More than surprising," Charles said. "That kind of talent isn't common. Has she trained professionally?" "I don't know," Gregory said carelessly, but he was starting to feel annoyed. Why was everyone so focused on her? "If she has no platform, that's a waste of talent," another man added. Gregory felt a twinge of anger. He didn't like it when someone else took the attention away from him, especially not someone he had brought in to serve drinks. Across the room, Emily continued to do her job. Some guests stopped her just to say how much they enjoyed the music. A few even asked her name. Emily responded politely, never staying too long. She was grateful for the kind words, but she didn't want to forget why she was there. She was working. She needed to finish her shift and go home. As the evening moved toward its final hours, the mood of the party remained soft and thoughtful. The usual noise and excitement were replaced with calm conversations and softer music. Many guests had left, but those who remained seemed more relaxed than before. Rachel approached her father and asked quietly, "Why did you make fun of her?" Gregory looked at her, surprised. "What are you talking about?" "The girl, Emily, the one who played the piano. Why did you mock her in front of everyone?" "I wasn't mocking her," Gregory said quickly. "It was a joke. Besides, she surprised everyone, didn't she?" "Maybe I helped her by giving her a chance." Rachel shook her head. "That's not how it felt." Gregory narrowed his eyes. "She's just a waitress, Rachel. Don't make it into something bigger than it is." "She's not just anything," Rachel replied. "She's more than you think." Gregory didn't like being challenged, even by his daughter. He turned away and walked toward the back garden, but Rachel's words stayed with him. After the party ended, the staff began cleaning up. Emily folded tablecloths, picked up empty glasses, and helped carry trash bags to the kitchen area. Her legs were tired, and her fingers were sore, but her mind was calm. She had done something brave, something honest. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. The catering manager came up to her. "You did great tonight, Emily, not just with the work. People are talking about your piano performance." Emily smiled softly. "Thanks." One of the guests even asked for your full name, the manager added. Said he might want to contact you. Emily was surprised. Really? Who? Some man in a gray suit. He gave me his card, said it's for you. The manager handed her a small business card. It read, Charles Myers, founder, Myers Music Academy. Emily looked at it and felt her heart skip a beat. She had heard that name before. It was one of the most respected music schools in the city. She placed the card carefully into her pocket and nodded. Thanks. After the cleaning was done, Emily changed back into her regular clothes and stepped out of the mansion. The night air was cool and the streets were quiet. She walked slowly toward the nearest bus stop. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and the stars above looked brighter than usual. She thought about everything that had happened, how she was pushed into playing the piano, how she had almost said no, and how something inside her had pushed her to say yes. She thought about Gregory's smirk, the quiet room, the clapping, Rachel's kind words, and the business card in her pocket. It felt unreal, like a dream. When she reached her small apartment, her little brother was asleep on the couch. Her mother was resting quietly in her bed. Emily changed into her pajamas, drank a glass of water, and sat at the window for a while. She didn't know if Charles Myers would call. She didn't know if anything would come out of tonight. But she had done something brave. She had stood up without shouting, without fighting, and without anger. She had answered cruelty with art. That was something she would never forget, and she knew something else too. Her story wasn't over. The next day, while she was folding laundry, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize appeared on the screen. Hello? Hi, is this Emily Carter? Yes. This is Charles Myers. I saw you perform last night at the Langston party. I was very impressed. Emily stood still. Thank you, sir. I'd like to talk more with you. Are you free this week to visit our academy? I think we might have a scholarship opportunity that could help you return to music. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her voice steady. Yes, she said softly. I'd like that very much. As she hung up the phone, she looked out the window. The world outside looked the same, but inside, everything had changed. She smiled, because sometimes, even in the middle of the most unexpected places, life finds a way to bring you back to the path you thought you had lost forever. 2 days after the party, Emily stood at the gate of the Myers Music Academy. She had never been there before, but she had heard about it from people who studied music. It was one of the best schools in the city, with students from all over the country. The building was large and old, but beautiful. Ivy climbed the stone walls, and tall windows allowed sunlight to pour into the rooms. The sound of a violin echoed faintly from somewhere inside. She took a deep breath and stepped through the gate. She had worn her cleanest clothes, a plain blue dress and a soft brown sweater. Her shoes were old but polished. Her hair was tied back neatly. She had no makeup on, but her eyes looked clear, and there was something different in the way she walked. Something stronger, more confident. Even though her heart beat fast with nervousness, she told herself she had nothing to lose. She was not expecting miracles. She just wanted to show who she was. Inside the main building, the receptionist smiled warmly when Emily gave her name. Mr. Myers is expecting you. He's just finishing a lesson. Please have a seat. Emily sat on the waiting bench and looked around. The walls were covered with black and white photos of famous musicians who had either studied here or taught here at some point. There were trophies in a glass case, posters for past performances, and a calendar with upcoming events. About 10 minutes later, a tall man in a gray suit walked toward her. His hair was silver, and he had kind, intelligent eyes. Emily Carter? He asked. Yes, she replied, standing up. I'm Charles Myers. It's a pleasure to meet you properly. She shook his hand. His grip was gentle, but firm. I'm glad you came. Let's talk in my office. They walked down a quiet hallway, passing a few students with instruments in hand. The sound of a flute came from a nearby room. Everything felt alive and musical. Inside, his office. The walls were lined with books and music sheets. A grand piano stood in the corner, and a warm light filled the space. He gestured for her to sit. "I must say," he began, "I've been thinking about your performance for the last 2 days. You have something rare, Emily. Not just skill, but emotion. You don't just play the piano. You speak through it." Emily felt her cheeks grow warm. She had heard many compliments in her life, but this one felt honest, without any show. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It's been a long time since I played like that." "Where did you learn?" "My father taught me. He passed away a few years ago. After that, we couldn't afford lessons and I had to stop." He nodded. "And now you work as a waitress?" "Yes. My mother is sick and my younger brother is still in school. I'm the only one working right now." Charles listened carefully, then leaned forward. "We offer scholarships here, full ones, for students who show great promise. I would like you to audition officially next week. If you pass, you can study here without paying anything." Emily's heart jumped. "Really?" "Yes, but it won't be easy. Our auditions are serious. You'll need to play 2 classical pieces and 1 original composition. You'll also need to answer questions about theory." She swallowed. She hadn't studied theory in years. "I'll try my best," he smiled. "That's all I ask." As she left the building that day, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was a small feeling at first, like a match in the dark, but it was warm and alive. She didn't tell her mother or brother everything. She only said that she might get a chance to play again. She didn't want to give them too much hope too soon. But every night after finishing her job, she sat at a broken keyboard in their living room and practiced. Some keys didn't work, and the sound was off, but her fingers remembered the movements. Her heart remembered the music. She borrowed sheet music from the library, listened to recordings online at an internet cafe, and practiced late into the night. She even wrote a new piece of her own, based on the feelings she had at the party. She called it "The Quiet Flame." The week passed quickly. On the morning of the audition, she woke up before the sun. She didn't eat much. Her stomach was too tight. She wore the same blue dress and sweater. Her mother touched her hand and said softly, "Whatever happens, we're proud of you." Her brother gave her a quick hug and whispered, "You've got this." At the academy, the audition hall was big, with high ceilings and rows of empty seats. A few other students were waiting outside. Some had fancy clothes and expensive instruments. Emily sat quietly, holding her music sheets in a folder. Her hands were cold, but she kept breathing slowly. When it was her turn, she walked to the front and faced the 3 judges. One of them was Charles. The others were teachers from the academy. "Please begin when you're ready," one of them said. She sat at the grand piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and took a deep breath. Her first piece was a Beethoven sonata. She had practiced it over and over. Her hands moved carefully at first, but soon her confidence returned. Her body moved with the rhythm, and the music filled the hall. The second piece was a Chopin nocturne. This one was slower, full of emotion. She let herself feel every note, remembering her father, her mother's tired eyes, her little brother's drawings. She let it all out. Finally, she played "The Quiet Flame," her own piece. It started small and slow, then grew into something rich and strong, like a fire that doesn't burn but warms. When she finished, there was silence in the room. The judges wrote notes. Charles gave her a small nod. "Thank you, Emily. You may wait outside." She walked out slowly. Her legs felt weak, but her heart felt full. No matter the result, she had done her best. About 30 minutes later, Charles stepped into the hallway. "Emily?" She stood up quickly. "You've been accepted," he said, smiling. "Full scholarship. Her hands flew to her mouth. She couldn't speak. Tears filled her eyes. "You earned it," he said gently. That night, when she told her mother and brother, they hugged tightly. Her mother cried. Her brother ran around the small room shouting, "My sister's going to music school!" Life began to change. Emily still worked part-time, but now she spent most of her days at the academy. She studied music theory, composition, and piano performance. The other students were surprised by her story, but they respected her. She worked harder than anyone else, and her talent was undeniable. Rachel Langston came to visit the academy. One day, she had written to Emily after the party, and they had stayed in touch. Rachel brought her a beautiful notebook filled with blank music sheets. "I thought you might use this for your next masterpiece," she said, smiling. Emily hugged her. "Thank you for standing up for me that night." Rachel shook her head. "You didn't need saving. You did that on your own." Meanwhile, Gregory Langston had heard the news from his daughter. At first he didn't say anything. Then, one day at his office, he told his assistant, "That piano girl, what was her name?" "Again?" his assistant replied. "Emily Carter." He leaned back in his chair, thinking. He wasn't used to people proving him wrong. He still didn't understand how a girl from a poor family could have turned his party upside down with just a few notes on a piano. But deep inside, he knew she had done something he couldn't forget. Emily's journey was far from over. She had a long road ahead. More lessons, more challenges, more performances. But now, she had a place to grow. She had teachers who believed in her, friends who stood beside her, and a family that supported her with all their hearts. Most importantly, she had herself. And that, she realized, was the most powerful thing of all. Because she had learned that true talent doesn't need a stage or a spotlight to shine. It just needs courage. Months passed. Emily's life had changed completely. She was no longer just a waitress working to survive each day. She was now a student at one of the best music academies in the city. Every day she walked through the tall gates of Myers Music Academy with a quiet pride in her heart. The other students respected her, and the teachers admired her dedication. She still worked part-time after classes to support her family, but her dreams were no longer distant. They were real, and they were growing. Emily became known as one of the most talented students in the academy. She learned quickly, practiced harder than anyone else, and never gave up, even on difficult pieces. Her fingers moved with grace, and her music touched people's hearts. But what made her truly special wasn't just her skill. It was the story behind her music, her pain, her struggle, her love for her family, and her deep emotions all lived inside the notes she played. People could feel that, and it made them stop and listen. Her original piece, "The Quiet Flame," had become a favorite among students and teachers. One day, Charles Myers told her they would include it in the upcoming winter concert. Every year, the Academy held a grand event where students performed in front of hundreds of people, music lovers, famous artists, and even talent scouts from other countries. It was an honor to be selected. Emily was nervous, but she accepted the challenge. She knew this could be her biggest moment yet. At home, things were slowly getting better too. Her mother's health was improving, and her brother was doing well in school. They both looked forward to the concert and talked about it every day. Her brother even made a small paper sign that read, "Go Emily," and taped it to their apartment wall. Emily smiled whenever she saw it. She knew they believed in her, and that gave her strength. On the night of the concert, the Academy was full of excitement. The large hall was decorated with lights and flowers. The seats were packed. People had come dressed in elegant clothes, holding programs with the names of the performers printed neatly. Backstage, students warmed up their voices and instruments. Some looked nervous, others confident. Emily sat quietly, holding her music sheets and breathing slowly. She was wearing a simple but elegant black dress. Her hair was done up in a neat bun, and she wore a thin silver necklace that had once belonged to her mother. She looked calm on the outside, but inside, her heart beat fast. She thought about everything that had brought her here. The party, the piano, the humiliation, the unexpected applause, and the scholarship. It all felt like a dream, but it was real, and she was ready. When her name was called, the lights dimmed, slightly. She walked onto the stage, holding her music. The grand piano sat at the center, shining under the soft lights. She took her seat, placed her fingers on the keys, and closed her eyes for a moment. The audience was silent. Then she began to play. The hall filled with music that felt like warmth and sadness mixed together. Her piece was full of quiet strength, like someone standing in the rain but still smiling. Each note carried a part of her journey. She thought about her father, who had first taught her how to play. She thought about her mother, who worked so hard even when she was sick. She thought about her little brother, full of dreams and drawings, and she thought about that night at Gregory Langston's party, when everything changed. The music swelled gently, then fell again into silence. When she finished, the audience didn't move. Then slowly, the applause began. First a few hands, then many, then all. People stood up. Some even had tears in their eyes. Emily looked out at the crowd, surprised. She had hoped to perform well, but she never expected this. Backstage, Charles Myers smiled. He knew she was special the first time he heard her, and now the whole room knew it too. Emily bowed deeply and left the stage. Her hands were still shaking, but her face glowed. The other students congratulated her, and teachers hugged her. Even some of the guests came backstage to say how much they loved her performance. Among the guests that night was someone Emily hadn't expected: Gregory Langston. He sat quietly in the back of the hall wearing a dark suit. Rachel had invited him. At first he didn't want to come, but something inside him told him he needed to. He had seen the girl's talent once, but that night he saw something more. He saw a young woman who had risen above everything he tried to throw at her. After the concert, Rachel brought her father backstage. "Emily," Rachel said, "there's someone here who wanted to say something." Emily turned and saw Gregory. Her smile faded for a second, unsure of what to expect. Gregory looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and spoke. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I was wrong about you. That night at the party, I acted like a fool. I tried to embarrass you, and instead you taught everyone a lesson, including me. Your performance tonight was unforgettable." Emily looked at him and nodded. "Thank you." He extended his hand. She shook it. That moment, small and quiet, closed a painful chapter in her life. She didn't need his approval, but his words gave her a strange sense of peace. Rachel hugged Emily tightly after her father left. "You were amazing. I'm so proud of you." The next few days were full of excitement. People started talking about Emily all over the city's music circles. Videos of her performance spread online. Journalists wrote articles about the girl, who went from waitress to star student. The Myers Academy even used her photo in their brochure, calling her a rising flame in the world of music. Soon, Emily began receiving offers. A small music company invited her to record her original piece in their studio. A local orchestra asked her to perform as a guest pianist. A university in Europe even reached out to ask if she would consider applying for their international program. Emily was overwhelmed but grateful. She knew she had choices now, something she had never really had before. She talked to Charles Myers and asked for his advice. He smiled and said, "The world is finally opening its doors to you. Walk through whichever one feels right." But Emily didn't rush. She took her time. She continued studying, continued working, and continued helping her family. She stayed grounded, just like her father had taught her. She didn't forget where she came from. Fame didn't change her. It made her even more focused. One evening, her brother came home waving a school flyer. "Emily, they're having a Talent show next month. Can you come and play something? Emily smiled. Only if you promise to draw me another sign. He laughed and ran off to start working on it. That night, Emily sat at her old keyboard at home. Some keys still didn't work, but she didn't mind. She had a grand piano at school now, and soon she might play in beautiful concert halls, but this broken keyboard was where it all began again. This was where her dreams came back to life. She began writing a new song. It didn't have a name yet, but the music came from her heart. It was a song about finding light in the darkest places. A song about quiet bravery. About a girl who carried trays but also carried dreams. About a flame that refused to die. She smiled as she played, knowing that this was just the beginning, because her journey had started at the lowest point, in a room full of strangers being laughed at by a millionaire. But she had stood tall. She had shown them who she really was, and now the world was listening. Her music had made people cry, made them think, made them believe again. She wasn't famous for being rich, or powerful, or perfect. She was known for being real. And maybe that's what the world needed most. Emily Carter, once a shy girl in a waitress uniform, was now a name people remembered. But more than her name, they remembered her story. A story of courage, a story of talent, a story of how one girl's music changed everything. And as long as she had a piano in front of her, she knew her story would never stop. It would keep growing note by note, song by song, forever.